Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and today I have another deck profile for you for the Journey Together format. This time I'm going to be talking about the Gardevoir Zoroark build that won Atlanta Regionals. Full credit for the list goes to Henry Chow. This list is only one card different, 59 cards the same. So he is, I think Isaiah Bradner was the one that had the original concept for the deck. I don't know, I mean, I'm sure they all worked on it. But Henry Chow is the one that won Atlanta with it. So credit to their whole group. But the deck is obviously very well positioned right now, seeing as it just won Atlanta. I think that the deck is still a little bit inconsistent in my opinion after playing it a lot. However, the matchup spread is really good, and it's one of the only decks that takes favorable matchups into Dragapult, which is what makes it very tempting right now. Also, a lot of people just have Gardevoir as a comfort pick for, myself included. I love playing Gardevoir, so you know, if that's just a deck that you really like, it is back. It's definitely still good in the Journey Together meta, even if it is not quite as consistent as it once was. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. We have a 3-2-2 Gardevoir line, you know, obviously playing a thinner Ralts and Kirlia line, since we're not trying to set up a bunch of Kirlias for refinements. We're playing like Rare Candies, but we still only need to get out like one Gardevoir EX most games, maybe two as just like sort of a luxury in case the first one gets knocked out. And then, you know, obviously playing two to avoid prizing. So the 3-2-2 line really works the best. And then we play a 1-2 Zoroark line. I'm sure this is something that a lot of people would have questions about from the Atlanta list. But it's fairly simple. The idea is that like Budew is very popular, right? So Budew is going to item lock you out of your Pokemon search. But turn one is the turn that you're usually getting the Zorua down. You have your Poffins, your Ultra Balls, your Nest Balls, your Artazon to search out the Zorua turn one, and then you're going to be item locked after that, trying to find your Zoroark. So it makes more sense to have the second copy of the Zoroark since it's harder to find. Even if you're not item locked, you have more ways to search for a Zorua than you do for the Zoroark. So it's just we're playing the second copy to have more ways to draw into it, basically. But we only obviously are setting up one per game. And this is what really makes Gardevoir still viable in the current format. I was testing my own Gardevoir Zoroark list before Atlanta that I felt like wasn't quite as consistent as I wanted to be, or didn't quite have all of the options that I wanted to have to really succeed in the metagame. But they managed to make this list work relatively well with the 1-2 Zoroark line, and just sort of that extra little bit of discard and draw, replacing your Refinement Kirlia that has rotated, just makes it significantly more consistent at finding the rare candy at the right times, finding your Night Stretchers late game, and getting your energy into the discard in the early to mid game. Next we have two copies of Munkidori. Most games we're only setting up one now, but we want to make sure we don't prize it, and we want to have the option to set up two in most games. I'd say that maybe saying that we only set up one most games is an overstatement. We definitely set up two Monkey a lot still, but we're not quite as reliant on the heavy Munkidori strategy as we were pre-rotation, and that's mostly just because the deck isn't consistent enough to set up more than two Munkidori consistently. So we're just playing the two copies, making sure that we get those Regener-Brains, make optimal use of that Psychic base damage, and set us up for multiple knockout turns with Miracle Force. Then we have Fezandipiti, just pretty essential in most decks right now. Gardevoir, what didn't always play it before, but usually it was replaced by like Radiant Greninja if the Fezandipiti wasn't in there. Now, without Radiant Greninja, it's pretty essential to have in every Gardevoir list that just like draw 3 option to try to get us into our rare candy, get us into our Night Stretchers. Consistency really is the key issue for the deck right now, so just having as many draw cards as possible makes sense. Then we're playing Lillie's Clefairy EX, of course, just for allowing those Psychic Pokemon to hit for weakness against Dragon types. Full Moon Rondo can come up in other situations as well, for sure, but it is mainly here as a Dragapult counter, allowing all our Pokemon to hit for weakness against Dragapults, Dracloaks, Treepies. Then we have Mew EX, comboing really well with Clefairy. Obviously, there's other situations we can use genome hacking as well, and Restart does give us a little bit of extra draw if we really need it in a pinch, especially early game. However, the primary purpose of Mew in the deck is to copy the opponent's Phantom Dive on Dragapult, and Clefairy is in play, so we hit for weakness on the Dragapult, and then we can go ahead and knock out something like a bench Duskull, or with Munkidori, even Dracloaks, by copying their Phantom Dive and hitting for weakness. There's lots of other decks you can copy with Mew against like the EV box deck. You can copy Flareon EX to knock it out back. I'm sure there's plenty of other situational attacks that you might use with Genomacking, but it's primarily here to copy Phantom Dive. And next, of course, we still have Screamtail. We still want to be able to access our opponent's bench, maybe trap a Noctowl and knock out their bench Pokemon, or take that easy knockout on Squawkabilly for game for our last couple of prize cards. Just super strong attacker in Gardevoir. Will pretty much always be staple in Gardevoir, having that attack that just so easily accesses the bench. And then we are still playing the one Drifloon. We do want to have a way to one-shot big stuff like Goldengos and Flareon EX, our Chaladons. So we are playing the Drifloon Bravery Charm package just to make sure that we have that single prize attacker option that can one-shot pretty much anything in the format. Also, pretty much gives us our only win condition to things like Charizard. Drifloon definitely doesn't feel as strong as it did last format, just because of consistency. It's harder to get 5 energy in the discard pile, or 4 even if that's what you need to do in certain situations. But definitely a little bit harder to pull off, but still going to get us there at the end game if our opponent's at like 2 prize cards and we're Ionoing them and then knocking them out with Drifloon and then trying to do it again next turn. Still very, very key to our strategy in many matchups. And our last Pokemon is the one copy of Budew, just having that Issue Pollen option to slow our opponents down. This is pretty essential in most matchups. It's obviously not every single game do we need to use the Budew. That's why we're only playing the one. We are risking prizing it, but definitely very important against like Dragapult. Honestly, we do use Budew most games if it is in the deck, just to slow down our opponent in one way or another. While we set up our Gardevoir, find our Rare Candy. Moving on to the trainers, though, we have 4 copies of Iono, just the best draw card in the deck, while also providing disruption for our opponent in the mid to late game. We're almost always coming back from behind, so the maximum count of Ionos. 3 copies of Professor's Research. This is the one difference that I took from the Atlanta list. I cut the second Morty for a third Research. I was having way too many hands where I had like Morty early game and was only drawing like 2 or 3 cards, and I just needed a Research to actually get into the game. So I just swapped out one of the Mortys for a third Research, and it's felt good so far. It's just the second strongest draw supporter we can have. We're not playing like Evo Team or anything, so Arven's not really necessary, and Arven's pretty dead if our opponent's using Issue Pollen, so we'd rather just like Research, dig through our deck, cut our Psychic Energy in the discard pile, find our Rare Candy Gardevoir combo, find our Kirlias, find our Zoroark. Just allows us to burn through our deck very quickly. 2 copies of Professor's Turo scenario keeps our keeps our Zoroark from getting trapped, allows us to remove our Fezandipiti from the board as a liability, since we do need to use Fezandipiti a lot, but it offers such easy prizes to our opponent. Allows us to reuse our Munkidoris, allows us to heal our Gardevoir, allows us to just clear off other liabilities like Budew, or maybe open up a bench spot for another Munkidori when our bench was locked. So it just gives us a ton of mobility, very, very important, especially against Dragapult. And then the single copy of Morty's Conviction, just a powerful draw card in the deck. We don't always want to research. Sometimes we already have the candy in hand, and we just want to draw a lot of cards. And especially against like Area 0 decks and things like that, Morty's Conviction is going to be drawing a lot of cards. Even if it's just a discard 1, draw 4, you get a Psychic Energy discard pile, draw a handful of cards. That's still pretty solid. Research, in most cases, in my opinion, is stronger, but there's definitely, once you get into like the mid to late game, you don't necessarily want to just be researching away all of your utility cards like Turos, Night Stretchers, and Super Odds. So having a mid to late game draw supporter that can just draw some cards without ditching our hand is very nice. And then we're playing the one of Jacq. This just helps a lot against Budew. Allows us to find our Zoroarks and Kirlias, Gardevoirs under the item lock. It'd be nice to be able to fit like more than one of these, but most of the time, like, we're also happy to just like research away a hand and try to find our evolutions this way. But having the Jacq as something that we draw here and there in the early to mid game to just guarantee our evolutions makes the deck a lot more consistent. Next, we have the item counts. So we have 3 Buddy-Buddy Poffin, only playing 3 now because we really only need to find, 1 Ralts, Budew, maybe Zorua early game. We don't need to find like a full bench of Pokemon. But we just do still want to find a few 70 HP Pokemon turn 1, so just playing 3 copies. 3 copies of Ultra Ball, just having more ways to search out the Gardevoir and the Zoroark, and as well as just getting our Psychic Energy in the discard pile, since that is a bit more of a struggle now. 2 copies of Earthen Vessel still, find our Dark Energy, get our Psychic Energy discard pile, find our Psychic Energy in hand for Ultra Ball and Secret Box discard fodder. Just 2 copies of Rare Candy because we're playing the 2 Kirlia, and a lot of time we're just trying to slow evolve. We're itchy pollinating, just manually evolving into our Kirlias. We both you and your opponent itchy pollen back and forth at each other depending on the matchup. So only playing 2 Rare Candies to make sure that we have some options when we're not playing against another Budew deck, but also not relying on it too heavily. 2 copies of Counter Catcher to have that Gust. We don't play any copies of Boss's Orders in this list. Which it does require significantly more careful play, but you just have to play around knowing that you don't have access to boss and you're only going to be able to Gust when you're behind. Makes Screamtail a lot more important to the deck, right? Being able to access the bench, even prizes. I'd honestly like a third copy of Counter Catcher, but the list is very tight. It's hard to fit stuff like that. So we are settling for 2 for now. We're playing 2 copies of Night Stretcher, 1 copy of Super Odd, similar to pre-rotation Gardevoir list, just having those couple of copies of Night Stretcher for the guaranteed access to the discard pile for things like getting our Gardevoir Rare Candy combo off, or getting our Drifloon or Fezandipiti back right away, or getting our Dark Energy in the hand from Munkidoris, but still playing that 1 copy of Super Odd for when we want to shuffle back in like Munkidori and Dark Energy, or we have a bad research early on that leaves a lot of important Pokemon in the discard pile. So still important to have that big recycle. 1 copy of Nest Ball, just another way to find our basics, and playing it over the 4th Buddy-Buddy Poffin, since it can search out the Munkidori and the Fezandipiti, or the Screamtail, just a little bit more versatile, even if not as strong early on. Once you hit the mid to late game, Nest Ball is pretty much exclusively better than something like Buddy-Buddy Poffin, so just allows for a bit more consistency early game while being a better card in the mid to late game. Then I'm playing 1 copy of Secret Box. I was testing around with like Precious Crawly in the deck before Atlanta. Tried Secret Box as well, and Secret Box is also good. I think that it definitely lends itself better to the deck in general. It has much better synergy with Professor's Research, and in most games, I think I talked about this in my last Gardevoir video, pre-rotation as well, where it's like Secret Box is very flexible, right? Like it can function as the Precious Crawly turn 1 if you go like Secret Box. If you open it, you go like Secret Box for Poffin, Artazon. That's already 3 basics, and then a supporter for next turn, yada yada. But it also just is super super powerful at any point of the game that you play it, right? More outs to Turo at the right times, more outs to piecing together Munkidori in the mid game, more outs to finding Rare Candy Gardevoir, more outs to finding your Drifloon Bravery Charm combo. More outs to just getting Psychic Energy in the discard pile if you haven't been able to do that yet. So Secret Box is a very, very versatile card, the most flexible possible A-Spec in Gardevoir. And that's why it's the most consistent for Gardevoir, because it offers you consistency at any point in the game that you draw it. Next, we have Stadiums, Tools, and Energy. So, of course, we're playing 2 copies of Artazon. It feels really bad if you prize one, especially with when you're trying to combo it with Secret Box. And there's a lot more jamming tower going around as well. I don't think this is something that obviously they were necessarily playing it for originally, but I think there is a lot more decks playing like a single copy of Jamming Tower in their decks. So if you need to use like an Artazon to set up early on and then they lock Jamming Tower into play, obviously that's pretty bad. So having a second Stadium to bump, very nice. Also just more basic search, more outs to basics in your opening hand by having 2 Artazon. If we don't find the first one, we might find the second one. So just gives us a bit better chance of finding our Ralts and Zoruas early, as well as having basic Pokemon search under item lock, also very, very nice. 2 copies of Bravery Charm. Bravery Charm is pretty versatile in the deck right now. Obviously, Drifloon and Screamtail being able to do more damage comes to mind immediately, but Bravery Charming Budews is also very, very strong when you and your opponent are both using Itchy Pollen back and forth at each other, especially because we only have 1 Budew. So if we're playing Budew Wars, a lot of the time we are going to have to Bravery Charm our Budew if we can't get the Munkidori set up. Normally, we could just Munkidori, heal off our Budew, but there will be games where, we don't get the Munkidori set up, we don't want our Budew to die because we're not ready to start, we don't have Rare Candy Gardevoir, we didn't find Kirlias, we're not ready to start going into an attacking position, so we want to make sure that our Budew stays alive to continue to slow down our opponent. 1 copy of Rescue Board. So Rescue Board has a little bit of flexibility, it helps us get, if we open like Munkidori with the Dark Energy and want to retreat into our Budew, we can still Rescue Board to the bench. It's another out to retreat into Budew in general if we don't find an energy. but it's primarily here to have a way to retreat and Zoroark for just 1 energy. Makes it a lot harder for our opponent to try to trap it. Otherwise, we'd be reliant on just Turoing it every time their opponent brings it up, unless we pre-attach an energy to it, which doesn't feel great. So Rescue Board just gives a little bit more flexibility, makes it so that Zoroark is not likely to get stuck in the active, which would be a big detriment against something like Dragapult if we didn't have the Rescue Board as an option. Usually, most games, you just throw this on the Zorua or the Zoroark as soon as you find it, assuming you're going to like research or something, just to make sure that that Rescue Board is there for the rest of the game. There's not really a lot of other Pokemon that you need to use Rescue Board on. There will be, and have been for me, situations where it will come up on other things, but it's primarily just going right on the Zoroark to make sure it never gets trapped. Now we're playing the standard 7 copies of Psychic Energy. This is just kind of the perfect count for finding them early to mid-game and having enough to get the 5 energy and Discard Pile consistently for Drifloon attacks. With less than 7, you really can't play Drifloon at that point. You prize 2 and all of a sudden Drifloon is a much worse card. But 7's sort of the nice number for trying to get 5 and Discard Pile for Drifloon in the mid to late game. And then 2 copies of Dark Energy. Like I said, most games were okay with settling for just 1 Munkidori. This still gives us the option to get 2 set up in most games. We don't prize any monkeys or any darks. But we're not really trying to set up 3 ever, so just the 2 Dark Energy, setting up Munkidoris, and making sure that we have the option to set up 2, and we can always set up 1, so we don't prize double dark or double monkey. Next we have the matchups. Let's move right into it. Why is Gardevoir so good right now? Favorable matchup into, this is Dragapult with no partner. I mean, you might say that Munkidori is the partner. People might play something like a Genesect in it, but this is, the no Dusknoir build of the deck. No Dusknoir, no Charizard, nothing like that. And that matchup is significantly favorable. They just don't have really good options for knocking out Dragapult. So once you get set up, you can just knocking out Gardevoir. So once you get set up, you have a Gardevoir that you can Turo around. You're one-shotting their Dragapults really, really easily. You can play around Monkey by just not putting extra damage on their board. So they just really don't have a lot of options for beating you. They certainly can still if they go like Itchy Pollen for a while and then find like Hawlucha Phantom Dive, knock out all of your Ralts or Kirlias on the same turn. They have options for still pushing out of the game, but it's really easy to come back from those situations. You have a lot of time. As long as you can get set up and have a solid board established, this matchup should be completely fine. Then we have Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt is another very good matchup because we can go ahead and come back from behind pretty consistently. Itchy Pollen's going to do a good job of slowing them down. Very easy to trade with a Raging Bolt. We have the Liz Clefairy. We can even hit for weakness on it. Most of the time we're trying to trade favorably with either Drifloon or Screamtail. And even if we fall significantly behind in the prize cards, we can still do things like Counter Catch with the Noctowl. I know them to a low hand size, and Screamtail around their bench Pokemon while they have a small hand, and come back from there. We can swing with Gardevoirs without taking knockouts. That way they can't use Fezandipiti, make it difficult for them to find Sadas, and then maybe they don't one-shot the Gardevoir, and then we can take like a 4 or even like a 6 prize turn in the end game by like Miracle Forcing a couple of things, and then using multiple Adrenabrains on the same turn, and then swinging with the Drifloon. So a lot of ways to come back against Raging Bolt, and those are the sort of plays that we're trying to set up, where they're trying to, if we get set up really quickly and can take knockouts, then we can just, prize trade them with one prizers. Most of the time, we have to make a bit of a comeback, so we're trying to just sort of put them to a low hand size, maybe bring up Noctowl, Screamtail around it, to set up some damage where we can finish off some Pokemon with Munkidori. And that way we play around Fezandipiti by taking multiple knockouts on the same turn. Next we have Terapagos, specifically this is like the Bouffalant build. The list that made top 8 I think also played like Pidgeot, some other interesting stuff, but really this is, Terapagos, Bouffalant, Munkidori, very favorable matchup. They just don't have options for one-shotting Gardevoir. Like you gotta be careful sometimes to play around like Lillie's Clefairy, to make sure that can't one-shot you, and they are going to take like a couple of prize lead usually, but once you get set up, you can just like wall them out with Gardevoirs and Munkidoris forever. You can do the same thing as you do against Raging Bolt, where you don't take knockouts to play around Fezandipiti, and that also works really, really well against them. And then you can Turo your Gardevoirs up so that they are healed. You have Drifloon as a one-shot option against things like Terapagos. You can use Screamtail to target down their Munkidoris in a pinch. You can Scream Tell target down their Hoot Hoots to really brick them early on. You can just Counter Catcher, Noctowl, Iono them in a low hand size, Scream Tail, Lone Hoot Hoot, or start using your Adrenabrains to pick off things like Hoot Hoots and Fan Rotoms for extra prizes as well. So yeah, they just don't have good options into you, and you have very good options into them once you're set up. Even matchups, we have Dragapult Dusknoir. You could call this more on the favorite side. I know, for me, I considered this matchup relatively favored, like a little bit favored for Dragapult Dusknoir before Atlanta. I know a lot of people that I know, a lot of top players are saying that the Henry Chow list is like 60-40 into Dragapult Dusknoir, but Gardevoir still did go have a negative win rate into Dragapult Dusknoir at Atlanta in day 2. So I'm kind of just putting it here on looking at all the data, putting everyone's opinions together, and just saying, okay, I think it's about even. The opinions differ a little bit too much. I think that it depends too much on the lists. I think that this list is obviously as built to beat Dragapult as consistently as possible. However, Andrew Hedrick's list is also pretty well designed to have a playable matchup against this list. We saw a close set in finals, and I think that that could be replicated over and over again. That sort of like 50-50-ish back and forth. The thing is that unlike Bombless, Dragapult Dusknoir does have ways to consistently knock out like 2 Kirlia in the same turn. Bombless sort of has to hope that you don't find your Kirlias. They can Hawlucha the Ralts, knock Phantom Dive it that way. But with the Dusknoir, they can Dusclops, pop on the Kirlia, Phantom Dive, knock out multiple Kirlias in turns. Way easier for them to do so. You can't just Bravery Charm a Mew EX to make sure that it survives a Phantom Dive, because they can Dusclops that too. They can Dusknoir away your Kirlias. They can Dusknoir your Gardevoir and then Hawlucha your Ralts to knock out both in the same turn. So they just have a lot of more ways to board wipe you and remove all of your attacking options from the board in one turn. And obviously, if they manage to do that, if they manage to knock out multiple of your attacking options, then that buys them a whole nother turn to take more prize cards without you being able to put up a threat. Dusclops also allows them to pick off your Munkidoris really well, which could be a key part of your strategy in the matchup. But your deck is still pretty well designed to beat Dragapult, right? They still have to hit a lot of pieces together and combos to wipe you off the board. If you're set up strong enough, you can make it not possible for them to do that. You can set up multiple threats. You can have the Clefairy on the bench. That way, even if they knock out the Gardevoir, then you have the Clefairy to come up. You can put the Bravery Charms, the Clefairy, and or the Mew, and then Iono them to a low hand size, and then say, okay, well, you got to find Dusclops and an energy attack with Dragapult. Maybe you even need a Dragapult as well in order to get an attack off here. So you have the pieces where you could knock out this Mew with a Bravery Charm, but you're going to need a lot to do so. Also, if you're taking multiple prize cards on the same turn with Phantom Dive, you might have even knocked out Budew earlier in the game, so you might already be at 5 prizes. Then you take 3 prize cards with a Phantom Dive. Then, they can't. If maybe you've taken one more prize somewhere along the way there, and then they can't Dusknoir, right? So you have some options for playing around Dusknoir as well if you can play yourself down to 1 prize. Generally, you can use your game plan is similar to the Bombless build, the no Dusknoir build, where you were trying to use Munkidoris to set up damage on Dracloaks and then knock out Dragapults and Dracloaks in the same turn with Phantom Dive, with weakness with the Clefairy. But yeah, matchup's a lot closer just because you're Ichipollinating each other back and forth, and then they can set up a couple of Dusclops on the bench and then just board wipe you. So it's really just if you can get set up reasonably well before they can set up a board that just sort of wipes yours. Next we have Turo Box. So Turo Box is an interesting matchup because if they have a strong start, they can obviously start torrential pumping really quickly. They can use multiple torrential pumps in a row before you get set up. That's sort of going to be in their game plan, right? Trying to keep your Kirlias and Ralts off the board with Torrential Pump, and then, win just based on, they take a 4 prize lead and then have to take 1 or 2 once you get set up. So a key thing in this matchup is to bench 3 Ralts. That gets you around the Torrential Pump. If you can find 3 Ralts early on before the Torrential Pump, then that plays you around it. You're still going to want to Ichi-Pollen them. Definitely lean on Iono early game to try to knock the Noctowls out of their hand before you use Ichi-Pollen. But once you get set up, and I get Gardevoir and some Munkidoris in play, the Pikachu's ability doesn't work, so you can just, if you Adrenabrain it, so you can just go through it with Adrenabrain. You can play around Fez really easy. You're sort of playing it similarly to the Terapagos Booth matchup. You do need to use the Adrenabrains to keep your Gardevoir healthy and out of Pikachu range, ideally, or just put them in a position where it's really, really unlikely for them to be able to hit a Pikachu attack. But once you do get to that point of the game where you're set up, you have Munkidoris, you have Gardevoir, there's really not good options like the Tropico's Buffalon deck for them to knock out a Gardevoir. If you have a full HP Gardevoir, that thing is surviving. There's nothing that they have that can one-shot that. So you're trying to get past the early game, set up multiple Ralts to try to survive the torrential pumps, and then start picking off their Hoots, and playing around Fezandipiti by not quite knocking things out and then generating them to take multiple knockouts in the following turn. Next we have Archaludon EX. So we'll talk mostly about the poison build with Petrant, since that is the most popular right now for sure. And I think that it's close. They can. The thing is that they can get at least a few prize lead, right? Sometimes even 3 or 4 prizes, and you can't use Fez doing that if they're taking poison knockouts, so it's more difficult for you to set up without the option to Fez draw 3. And then of course they have bosses to target down your Zorua to try to limit your draw that way. And then once you do get set up, you need to be finding Drifloon plays to one-shot their Archaludons, or you need to find multiple Munkidori to heal off your Gardevoir, because if it has damage on it, they can push with Mochi and Black Belt or Kirin to get up to the numbers to knock out your Gardevoir in one hit. One hit plus the Psychic base damage. So it's much more of a sort of cat and mouse game than it was last format, mostly because they have that Petrant option to take such a strong prize lead. And your Budew is only going to slow them down so much when all they need is Brute Bonnet, Agent Booster, and the Perilous Jungle to knock out the Budew. So yeah, you just need to set up a lot more to win this matchup. If you do get set up, you get a Gardevoir, you get multiple Monkeys to heal the damage off of it. A lot of time they have to rely on things like, your saving grace is that they have to rely on things like Squawkabilly, Mew EX, Latias EX, Fezandipiti to get set up and continue to attack. So you might not even have to go for a one-shot on Archaludon, or play the 2-shot game on Archaludon. You might be able to just go around it with Screamtail on the Squawk, and then maybe you Miracle Force a Fezandipiti, then you Adrenabrain, Drifloon for 300 on the Archa, right? So there's a lot of lines you can take. You're trying to get past the early phase of the game, and then throw in a couple single prizers to even out the prize trade, and then use Drifloon to take your last big knockout, or pick off one of the many 2 prizes that they might play. Next we have Eevees, another even matchup. Now this matchup is very interesting because Gardevoir, once you're set up, you do perform very well into them. Gardevoir, Miracle Force, Adrenabrain is really good into the Flareon and the Sylveon. Just math-wise, Drifloon, of course, can come in there and one-shot stuff. The problem is Angelite. They can go back and forth between using Angelite to clear your Gardevoirs off the board or your Munkidoris off the board, and then Magical Charming for 160 to take a prize. And so you have to manage your rare candies really very carefully. You want to make sure that you have those options. This is another matchup where setting up a third Ralts, setting up a third Ralts is something that you can't do every game. You only play 3, so sometimes you're gonna have a prize against Terrabox or the Sylveon, and it's not gonna be an option. And you might just not be able to, you don't have that many search. The deck is still a little bit inconsistent. You might not find the third Ralts. You might not have the bench space for third Ralts in certain situations. You might need other things to actually play the game. So sometimes you get caught where they can just Angel Light both of your Gardevoir pieces off the board every other turn, and you have to keep finding ways to try to get that thing back set back up. Now, if you can get a Drifloon on it with a Bravery Charm that's doing enough damage to one-shot their Pokemon, then even if they Angelite the Gardevoir, you should be able to still attack with Drifloon. Now, they might be able to Angelite Gardevoir and Drifloon at that point if you don't have another Gardevoir set up, and then even if you do have another Gardevoir set up, you still have to get all the Psychic Energy back into the discard pile. So, very tricky matchup. They do struggle against Iono late game, so that's sort of your key. They are fairly inconsistent themselves, so sometimes they'll just only get one attacker set up by the time that you start attacking, and then you can just sort of Drifloon knock that out. Drifloon knock out their lone Sylveon, and then they aren't able to get another one set up, and so then you remove their Angelite option at that point, and then you set up your Gardevoir from there with the double monkey, and then you're out of Carnelian one-shot range, and that's sort of how you come back in the late game there. Iono's mid to late game is going to be, of course, as always, pretty important here. But yeah, that's sort of how they're going to play the matchup. They're just going to go back and forth between Angelite and Magical Charm, and then have the Flareon on the bench, the threat to knock out your Gardevoir if it comes up with only 30 damage, or if it's sitting on the bench with a little bit of damage on it. Then we have unfavorable matchups, we have Gholdengo first. This matchup, I mean, it very much depends on the Gholdengo list. I'm sort of thinking like my own Gholdengo list, which is like a Dunsparce build, or I have a Dragon Bolt build that I like a lot as well. So we could sort of think of it as either of those builds. But generally, when we say that Gholdengo is a bad matchup for Gardevoir, we're thinking of the combination of Gholdengo, Munkidori, some sort of draw support, whether it be the Dunsparce or Dracloaks, or maybe just like more supporters and stuff in the list that don't play any partner. And then cards like Turos, and then now often Jamming Tower. Most Gholdengo lists are going to be playing Jamming Tower now to beat Gardevoir. So Jamming Tower makes your Drifloon a really, really bad option, since they can take a free prize on it, and they're usually going to be in uneven prizes from your Budew earlier anyways. And then, of course, they can pretty easily one-shot your Gardevoir, so you can't sort of play around with that most of the time. You have to hope that, an Iono sticks at some point maybe. But, depending on what draw options they have and how strong they've set up their board, that might not be a realistic strategy either. And then you're hoping maybe Iono Drifloon sticks later and they don't find Jamming Tower or something like that for one-shots. But it's really hard, especially if you get their Munkidori set up, for you to, like, take knockouts from Miracle Force ever. Like, Drifloon is really going to be... you're going to have to lean on that really heavily to take knockouts, which gets punished really hard if they play Jamming Tower, especially if they play multiple Jamming Tower. And then, of course, if you do, you are going to have to probably try to swing with Miracle Force for a 2-shot at some point, especially if they don't have Monkey in play, and maybe try to Iono them out of finding Monkey. But then they can punish you by just finding a Turo and healing all the damage off, and then you just sort of wasted a turn. So that is sort of your general game plan. You use Gardevoir in the sort of the mid game once you're set up, with Adrenabrains while they don't have the Munkidori down, to try to set up some sort of like multiple knockout turns, or put pressure on them, and make it so that they miss knockouts, since Gardevoir is the hardest thing for them to knock out. But and then you go into Drifloon once you get there to take big knockouts in one hit. But if they set up fairly well, and none of your Ionos don't stick, they find the Arvins for superiors, or they find the Industries Pro, you are gonna have a pretty rough time. Sometimes they will just also like sort of draw into against Itchy Pollen, and then you can maybe go for go into Screamtail from there and just sort of like pick off single prizers. Going for Screamtail early game when you think that like there's not a good chance of your Gardevoir surviving is also a decent strat. If there's single prizers on the board for you to pick off, you can like Screamtail, knock out their Munkidori before you go in with Gardevoir. That's a very solid option too. And then of course we have Charizard. Gardevoir just really is not built to beat right now. You definitely still can, you slow them down a lot with Itchy Pollen, and you sort of get set up there. They should have like some built-in ways to play into Budew, whether it be the Noctowl build, whether they're playing like Charmeleon Evo TM, or they're playing the Noctowl build, so they can just use like Rotom or Terapagos to knock out your Rotoms, and take a few prize cards in the setup phase. And then they set up a couple Charizards in the late game when you start attacking. And at that point, it's pretty difficult for you to respond to Charizards. You can, maybe knock out one with Mew EX later, or you can go around it if they bench other 2-prize Pokemon, or you can, go for the counter catcher on Noctowl, Iono, and try to Screamtail for a couple of prize cards. But it's just not a really reliable strategy against Charizard. They should be able to pretty easily, take a few prize lead. Usually, you're operating from, a 2 to 3 prize card deficit once you get into the game. Unless you just, you pop off, you have research into Rare Candy Gardevoir turn 2. Usually you're going to be operating from at least a couple of a prize deficit. So once they set up a couple of Charizards that you can't really knock out easily, you sort of removes Gardevoir as an attacker for you. You can Drifloon to one-shot one at some point, maybe, but, it's still difficult to do so, especially if they're, bossing your... Gardevoirs, and you have to play around Briar as well. They can go down to if you go down to 2 prize cards, and they just do a Briar play for 3 on prize cards on you. That can be really rough as well. So it's difficult for you to jump ahead in the mid game. Definitely winnable still. I don't think either of these matchups are unwinnable. Maybe 40-60s, maybe a little bit worse, but definitely just not ideal. Your best bet, Itchy Pollen into Hand Disruption plus Counter Catcher on Noctowl plus Iono. And similar against Goldengo, Itchy Pollen into Iono, Screamtail on, maybe their Dunsparce or their Draclos, sort of get rid of some of their Jawsport, get rid of their Munkidori. Those are some of your ways to make these matchups a little bit more winnable. That's going to be it for today, though. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this and you want to check out any of my other content or my socials, all of that will be in the link tree in the description below. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed playing some Gardevoir. Have a great night.